What's good, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Goats of Growth. My guest today, by the way, is somebody who epitomizes the title of this show. This show is inspirational and aspirational. This one is definitely on the inspirational side because maybe this guest has had aspirations to have the kind of career he's had, but now he's done it and he's here to share a little bit about it with us. So nevertheless, without further ado, my guest is David DMo Morse, a 20-plus year veteran of the enterprise software game. He and his teams have closed more than $2 billion in revenues, which includes 3 acquisitions and an IPO. He just finished a 10-year run at Cambridge Mobile Telematics, where he helped lead the company as CRO from zero to multiple hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And now he's advising early and growth stage B2B SaaS companies on selling more to big companies. Speaking of big companies, he's the author of the Amazon bestseller, congratulations, Demo, The Heart of the Sale, How to Close More Deals with Disciplined Discovery. That word disciplined, certainly, I think without the word disciplined, it misses a little bit, right? So the fact that disciplined discovery was very intentional, I would imagine, and I appreciate that for sure. He's a former U.S. Marine officer, Harvard MBA, comedian, and rapper. Just wow. Demo, welcome to the Goats of Growth.
Wow. Thank you, Jay. Super psyched to be here. I love the podcast and, love the way you interact with the guests, man. It's super fun.
Yeah, appreciate that. So I'd be remiss not to ask that, that last line that I just read, right? Like U.S. Marine officer, Harvard MBA, comedian, rapper. Like most people, at least me personally, maybe I shouldn't speak for everybody, but when I picture a U.S. Marine, I don't also immediately go to rapper, comedian. Tell me about that. Tell me a little bit about the demo that is the rapper and comedian within all that. And then I want to get into some of the lessons you learned as a U.S. Marine.
Okay. Definitely I could do that. So one of the lessons I learned as a Marine came from a fellow lieutenant. And he says, you have to be able to, if you're going to hoot with the owls, you need to be able to soar with the eagles. And I always use that as like a little metaphor for being really ambitious, being disciplined, being demanding, accomplishing great things, but also leading with love and having a lot of fun along the way. And I think you can construct a life, you can construct a career by bringing those two things together. In fact, that's how I've done it for, decades. And I've really enjoyed bringing those two things together and finding out how to accomplish big things, but make it fun.
So just the next natural question I want to ask is, where did you develop those comedian, rapper sort of skills? Was it just at home? Was it with some and how old were you when you started to explore that side of you?
I was pretty much maybe from day one class clown, very, very young. I was in a program, like a gifted and talented program, and we made a movie. And I totally wrecked the whole movie because I decided to zoom in and zoom out for the whole thing. I was on the camera because I thought it would be funny, and it was terrible, but it didn't stop me from doing it. So that was my earliest memory of messing around. But over time, I've always just had a good sense of humor. And then probably about maybe 15 years ago, my wife got me a gift certificate to Improv 101. And I started to, I needed a hobby, and it was just great because it's like a thing for people with quick wit who like to work in teams, who like to perform. So honed skills further. And then how I got into rap was I'd always been a 90s rap baby. I just loved the music. And then I was cast in a show called Beatbox, which it was an improv show, which made you freestyle rap. So not only did you have to rhyme, but you had to inhabit characters. You had to be on stage with others. You had to make it make sense. You had to have a story. You had to make it funny. The degree of difficulty over that show, was super crazy, but fun. And so I just, if you were to ask me what inspires me, it's about being creative, having fun, learning, doing these things. And, it's just something I gravitated towards, but I probably had something in my genes that predisposed me to maybe being good at some of those things.
How old were you when you did that, when you went and performed and did freestyle and all that stuff?
I think it was maybe I first started to, I feel 2012-ish, maybe. And it was great. I trained at Second City in Chicago. I performed shows around the world. Um, uh, London, Norway,
Wow.
like Chicago, New York. So it's been super fun to get up on stage. But then COVID hit. A lot of the theaters closed in Boston, and most I've
Mm.
been focused on just doing stuff online
That is
since then.
amazing.
Yeah.
Very unique for sure. So getting back to U.S., your experience obviously as a Marine. People listening to this might thinking, wow, working for a former Marine as a sales leader, as a boss, must be really hard, must be really tough. Tell me if that perception is accurate about you, or what people may have said about you, and then I suspect not, but tell me. And then what were some of the other lessons that you learned as a Marine besides hooting like an owl and soaring with the eagle?
Yeah, it's a good insight, Jay, because I think a lot of people have a perception of the military as something that's command and control. You're a bunch of robots. In my experiences, nothing could be further from the truth. Leadership is leadership, no matter where you go. It just happens that the Marines has a structured, it's a kind of a structured environment around leadership and warfare. But you still have to inspire people. You still have to win the hearts and minds of the people you lead. You still have to be effective. So definitely discipline and being demanding and having high standards really, I think, did come from the Marines because it crystallized it because it was just part of the culture.
Hmm.
And I enjoyed that aspect of it. It was about being part of something elite. It was about being part of something great. And I'm super psyched. I'm going to go down and see my friend in Philly, the birthplace of the Marine Corps, for the 250th anniversary of the Marine Corps coming up on November 10th. So I still have friends, but I go back to that time as something that really influenced me deeply in how I lead around having high standards and instilling discipline in what you do professionally.
And as far as the people aspect of that, let me just go a little bit deeper. Were there particular lessons that you learned as a Marine that you openly shared with your teams, whether it be discipline again, which happens to be the subtitle of the book, and some of those other learnings that frankly, as you go through as you've gone through your days that you've leaned on almost on a regular basis, right? And obviously, the core of it is discipline. And what are some of the others?
I mean, there's probably three I would say that stand out. The first one is lead by example. When I was a Marine and I ran an 81 millimeter mortar platoon, I could run the fire direction center. I could shoot the mortars. I could carry the 70-pound tube on a 25-mile hike, just like all the other Marines in my platoon. Right. So to show that you have empathy for the job and you could do it, also because you can model behaviors. So I think if you translate that to sales, if you're a sales leader,
Hmm.
it's important that you be able to model the behaviors that you expect of the people who are on your team. Like a good example of that is I worked with my team to develop the one-page business case, right? It was a way to resonate with executive buyers, be more quantitative, build a business narrative. And you know what? I did the very first one with a customer and I put it on video, warts and all. I wasn't perfect the first time I did it, but I showed it and I showed that I was committed to it and I wasn't afraid. And I think it opened it up for others to do it. And then eventually we all got better at it. So that's lead by example is one. The second one is, the more you sweat in peacetime, the less you bleed in war. And, the Marine Corps is just famous for training. But with sales, I'm like, if you were to ask anybody who's worked in my organizations, there's a lot of sales leaders who kind of skimp on training. I'm not one of those people. I make it part of our weekly cadence during deal reviews as a training exercise. We did role plays all the time. And I taught and created a lot of that myself. And so did my junior leaders. And GE had the saying, leaders are teachers. And I really, really believe that. And so most salespeople practice on customers. I think you should not practice on customers. I think you should practice.
Hmm.
And then when you get out there, you're better prepared. Just like an athlete, just like an actor,
Hmm.
same philosophy in sales. So that's number two is the more you sweat peace, the less you bleed in war. And then third is lead from the front. Even generals, they taught us very early, when you're an officer, you could definitely send your Marines up to the front to patrol and man the front lines. But you also have to go spend time up there to see what's really, really going on with your own eyes and with your own ears. So, as a leader, even though you're a senior CRO, you're always on calls, observing, seeing where the team is struggling firsthand. You're talking to customers firsthand. You're not just sitting behind spreadsheets. You're not just sitting behind dashboards. You're actively engaged with what's happening out on the front lines. So, I think those lessons, even though they come from the military and you think it's like a command and control thing, I don't know. I think it's a leadership thing.
I don't think I'll ever forget what you just said there. The more you sweat in peacetime, the more you'll bleed the less you'll bleed in war. That is impactful and amazing. By the way, thank you for your service as well. That is something that is just so admirable and just humbling to hear every time I hear somebody that's served in the U.S. military, particularly the Marines. It's just incredible. So thank you. Turning to the book here for a moment, the big question for me is always why. Like, why did you write the book? What compelled you? Because I know it's not certainly an easy undertaking, given how busy you are in your operator role or work.
Yeah. It's a very good question because there are two pieces to this. One is the slow burn, and then the other one is lighting the fuse. So the slow burn is, we've had all the success, $2 billion, lots of success. But I would observe often it could have even been better, right? Mm-hmm. Because there were so many deals that slipped or evaporated or failed to close for the amount of money we could have closed them for. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it came back to just gaps in our knowledge on the people, priorities, the process, the problem, the payoff. And those gaps are gaps that are designed to be filled with the buyer together using discovery. And so discovery is like this feeder behavior that influences everything else that comes in the sales cycle. So that was the slow burn, this kind of nagging feeling. I knew we had to do something about it. And then what lit the fuse was I was watching Mark Roberge had a video on his website. He was doing a role play with John McMahon, and they were doing a conversation between a manager and a salesperson. And the salesperson couldn't answer any questions that John was asking, right? Mark was playing the seller. And I'm like, I have had 1,000 of these conversations. The madness must stop, right? So I just started writing because I'm like, I think I can help. We've solved some of these problems with my team. We could do more work to solve them even more. And I think by putting out a book based on, 25 years of wisdom of selling to big companies and doing this, I could help a lot of people avoid those situations down the road where you just have those deals evaporate or close late or slip or fail to close for the money you thought they would.
I actually saw that role play, by the way, as well, which is why I was smiling. For sure. Yeah, that was it
stands out, doesn't it? I mean, it was just like you felt it. It was just like, oh, how many times we're going to have these conversations?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I empathize on both sides of that. I empathize for Mark's role, and I empathize for John's role too, in terms of the just the imagined frustration that people like you might have. One thing you mentioned is that you could have done more, right? All the success, $2 billion in enterprise value, and all that, could have done more. My mind immediately goes to, wow, like what kind of a person has that? Like, what is it about you that sort of your mind goes there? And so I have to ask, like, what like, how do you, like, is that part of the success that the ingredients or the components that makes up David Morse's success, right? Because it's never good enough. Like, where does that come from?
Maybe there's this deep dissatisfaction or deep desire to always improve.
Yeah.
Like, you're here in New England, like the GOATs, Tom Brady, right? As great as he was never satisfied. Mm-hmm. And he reached the pinnacle.
Yeah.
And he worked as hard as a rookie until his last year. Mm-hmm. Really, like, what an inspiration, because it's about, it's not about your competition with others, although that's certainly true in the market. It's really about how good can you be? You versus you.
Yeah.
You this year versus you last year. Can you be better? And, this is this is capitalism, right? And if you're a CRO, you work for a software company, your company and your investors expect growth.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it never goes down, right? The expectations always go up.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
if that's the dynamic, you have to be a person that always wants to go up too.
Yeah, and I would imagine during the hiring process that you're looking to find people that have that mindset as well, right? You'd rather find those people and hire those people than to try to, change who they are, right? Change that baseline to try to get it up. You have somebody like you, and that's the floor, so to speak, right? There's a lot of room for growth, and as they say, rising tide raises all boats.
Yeah, I think so, Jay. I think that's that demanding need. When people are demanding of themselves, they have goals for themselves, they're ambitious, they work hard, they learn. Like those are all kind of like, I think those like foundational qualities that contribute to success no matter what you do. So having that in somebody's DNA is like really, really important. And it's even like, I mean, you see it today, right? If you're not a learner today around AI, no matter what things have been like in the past,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like you're kind of going to get left behind.
Mm-hmm. For
So
sure.
you have to have just that mentality of always learning, always improving, because, what got you here won't get you there, so to speak.
When you think about discovery, right, and I love the name of the book, The Heart of the Sale. As I mentioned to you offline, it's like in my mind, it's pumping all of the blood into the other areas of the sale, right, the other areas of the body and so forth. So I think it's so spot on. And you mentioned that there are a lot that you could have done better, right? Like, the question is that was that something that you were realizing in real time? In other words, that this could have been better, we could have done this better, or is it something where you're looking back at it maybe several years ago, or maybe even a week after, maybe deals have lost or deals you closed, and you're sort of evaluating and you're saying, you know what, here's how we could have actually created more value for the company in this way. And were you documenting them contemporaneously in terms of, and then going and taking those learnings immediately to get better for the next quarter or the next year? Tell me about your process of discovering, frankly, your own, inefficiencies.
Yeah, it's, I love that because I think it's a mix of things. One is in real time, when you're observing deals, you're observing meetings, and you have enough experience and pattern recognition and wisdom, you can definitely pick out on an individual basis with an individual person or an individual deal, like what might be the gap, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing deal reviews, it's very clear, like where the gaps are. But then over time, as you do it enough and you start seeing your metrics, you start seeing patterns of behaviors in your people, you can start to identify, is this an individual coaching issue with David, or is this a pattern of things that the rest of the sales team could benefit from learning from? And you start to do a little bit of both, a little bit of individual coaching, a little bit of team coaching, a little bit of organizational coaching. And so, one of the things I noticed was when we were selling our new claim solution to insurers. We had a very good solution for the pricing part of the organization. We were now selling a claims solution, telematics. And what I noticed is that there were even more stakeholders on that side. And so herding the cats was really, really tough. And so one of the things I did was actually add a step to the sales process, which was a value and vision discovery workshop. Now, somebody would say, you added a step to the sales process? Like, how stupid are you? Like, what are you doing? But what I noticed was that we weren't getting consensus on the problem. We weren't getting consensus on the business case. We weren't getting consensus on the capabilities. And one of the ways to foster consensus is to bring together a group of people, educate them, facilitate a debate amongst themselves, not focus on what I was selling, like my specific solution or me as a vendor, but focus on what problems are we solving and what are the general capabilities you need. And what I wanted to get to was everybody had a consensus like this. We were solving the, let's say, advanced charges problem. It's a problem where you pay a lot for rental cars and tows and things like that in the insurance industry. They would agree on that. And then they would say, well, we need telematics to help us do this. So forget about the fact that CMT exists. The fact is we just need these foundational capabilities to move forward. And eventually I was confident that CMT was a quality company and we'd be, a good choice if they wanted to go in the direction of telematics. So that's an example where you just notice what's happening with deals and you take a first principles approach to say, well, what is the bottleneck? The bottleneck is consensus on the problem. So what do you do to design the thing that gets you consensus on the problem?
So let me ask you this. I appreciate that. It makes sense. So a couple of things. I was feeling a little ignorant when I came across that discovery workshop, because I'm like, I've never heard this before, but it sounds like this is something that you pioneered, something that you added to it, right? You sort of brought this to the table. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other part of it is that because one of the things you said is, one of the challenges there is group think, right? When you have same people around the table, and then all of a sudden there's group think, and they're not necessarily thinking as individuals. And one of the nuances there, and one of the skills is to, even though they're in a group, is to try to still be one-on-one with people while in the group. But coming out of there is the big thing, to make sure that everybody is on the same page. When discovery is done individually across multiple stakeholders, is it that, because in other words, adding this next step wasn't necessary if the others were being executed correctly. In other words, if the individual discoveries were being executed correctly and you had people that are on the front line, so to speak, that were able to connect all of the dots and build consensus the traditional way. Is that right? And you said, okay, you know what? Forget all that. Like, we're going to do this discovery workshop, and that's going to help solve a lot of this stuff immediately. Do I have that right?
A little bit, Jay, but I think there's some nuance to it, because
Okay.
I think it's not an either or thing. It's a both thing. So I'm a big fan of one-on-one discovery when you can get it, right? Mm-hmm. Because you don't have the group think. You allow less vocal people to air their concerns, which is what you really want. You want people to bring out like what's important to them, where are their challenges, what are their concerns about what we're talking about, without the pressure of other people in a social situation. So you still do that. Mm-hmm. The discovery workshop was designed to, once you kind of done that, bring them all together and facilitate a debate together. Right, because you have all these hidden kind of agendas and these hidden feelings, and they don't get resolved because people stay separate. Mm-hmm. Now, also, sometimes you just may not get everyone one-on-one. So you just have to take a risk and say, look, I'm going to get everybody together as a group. I'm going to be a good facilitator, and I'm still going to try, even in a group setting, to bring out that one-on-one aspect in a very, it's a finesse move. It's a move of service for your customers to be a consultant rather than somebody who's pitching product. Helping them talk amongst themselves is like a really great thing to do in a very big group of big companies, I think.
You might not have the direct answer to this question, but I just have to ask. I can't let it just dangle out there. Did you notice a quantifiable difference in your close rate, or whatever the metric that you're measuring there?
We did. So we measured, how fast, like, let's say deals went from that discovery phase to the solution phase, the business case, the executive approval. So that got faster.
Yep.
The number of deals that were qualified that actually closed went up. And then the deal sizes, went up. And the good thing is if you didn't reach consensus, what was also good was you didn't spend a lot more time on it, and you didn't spend time building a solution. You didn't spend time doing all these other activities if people hadn't agreed on the problem in the business case first. So, I don't know where that showed up more in like the qualified deal win rate, I would say, is where that shows up. Mm-hmm. But that's equally valuable too, right? Because all you have is your time,
right,
as a seller. And, I think my experience is that the sellers who are really rigorous in that area of qualification and spend their time with the deals most likely to close, and the customers who are most interested in solving their problems and who are most interested in engaging with you, that's where to double down. When you're pushing on things and you're not getting any reciprocation, it's really, really tough. That's a hard way to spend your time.
Thank you for that. I want to get into the heart of the sale, which is what you call the Magnificent Seven. But before I get into that, what you just mentioned just brings up another question, which is when somebody is managing an enterprise sale, as you sort of depict in many ways in the book. What's the capacity for managing multiple enterprise sales? Because I feel like this one sale is enough. I'm like, holy crap, there's so much that needs to be done on this one thing. If I were an enterprise sales rep, like, can I handle, is your expectation that someone's going to have 20, 30 of these deals going through at the same time with obviously in various stages? Like, maybe it's a hard question to answer because each company is different, but what comes to mind when you hear me say that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger and more strategic it is, the fewer accounts you have. In general, is the rule. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we had accounts that were absolutely huge that we had actually multiple sellers covering the account because they were so big, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's especially true of like multinationals in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
where each country has a degree of decision making, and you need to have a local person, but they're all working together to try to get like let's say a master contract done, but then do projects in all these different countries.
Yeah.
So you can have, that's the extreme where you have multiple people on very, very huge accounts. I would imagine the Oracle sales rep who closed ChatGPT for like $30 billion, whatever it was, there is hundreds of people on that account, right? It could
Yeah.
support it, right?
Right.
Now, that said, as you go, it's probably dependent upon the solution you sell and the intensity of it. But if enterprise is probably, I got to think you could, like, let's say it's above 100 to 500K ARR type deals, you could probably only really work 10 of those accounts in a quality way at any one time.
Okay.
Something like that,
Yep.
and then as you go down into the mid-market and SMB, obviously your motion changes to where you can spend more time with accounts, but you don't go into the depth you might with a very, very strategic account.
Well, sorry, one more question regarding this. So does that, let's say there's 10 accounts that you're working at any one given time. Is the expectation then, does the 80-20 rule apply there? In other words, if you can close two of those, right? Great, good job, right? Or is the expectation higher than that, where you should close 40% of those? Like, if somebody's working 10 accounts that are between $100,000 and $500,000, what's the expectation that their number of deals they're going to close?
Again, Jay, it may differ, and hopefully you're going to have some data on this as a sales leader for the math. And I've seen it done a couple of ways. One is just straight math. You've got these percentages and you've got these conversion rates, and you could say, all right, look, every strategic account executive can handle 10 accounts and they'll close 3. That's pretty much the machine. Then there's other companies, I've worked for, where you look at the accounts they have and you try to maximize the territory, and you set an expectation based on the capacity of the customer to buy new solutions or expand what they're doing. And you look at it from more of a first principles account potential basis, because you can have a great account that's probably primed to buy a lot more, and there's a higher expectation on that account versus something where we may not have product market fit yet. You're just getting in the door, still a big company, but you're just getting started. So again, I think it's a lot of context, a lot of first principles thinking. But yes, there are those rubrics out there if you have more of a predictable machine type of company.
Got it. Okay. And where these questions are coming from, really, I'm putting my enterprise sales rep hat on, if you will. And if I'm going into, so it's a time of year, right? End of the year, end of the quarter, I'm looking for a new opportunity, all this stuff. And it's like, people start evaluating, okay, well, how realistic is this number? What are the expectations? Like all of these things. And so just as a curiosity thing, it's like, okay, if I have these large accounts at XYZ company that might be different at the new company, so to speak, and I'm just getting started, like, what are my expectations going to be, and how realistic is it that I'm going to be able to meet those expectations, if you will, right? That's always the question that people have. So
yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And if you're really good at qualifying, you can answer a lot of that yourself, right? If you have some experience and you're really good at qualifying, it's when people tell themselves stories of hope, that is where they kind of don't end up in an accurate place. If they use evidence, they end up in a little bit more of an accurate place.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get into that. Let's get into what you call the Magnificent Seven. Walk us through it. Just walk us through what the Magnificent Seven are, why they're important. Then I'll dive deep into a couple of those.
Yeah, I will. And there's a couple of points to make. So one is, think about these are just categories of questions that you're probably going to ask sometime during an enterprise sales cycle or a large company sales cycle. It doesn't mean you ask them in order because you bounce around a lot. Depending on who you're talking to, it's not as neat and clean as you would think it would be.
Yeah.
But there is some order, I think, to this. Mm-hmm. The second thing I would say is that the problem, one of the Magnificent Seven, deserves a special area of emphasis because it's the key to everything. So those are the 2 points I want to make. So, the first of the Magnificent Seven are provoking questions. So you want to arouse the customer's curiosity because let's say they're not looking for something you're selling and they have a latent need or they're unaware, you want to jolt them out of that and make them a little bit more curious about what you're talking about. So, in the insurance, when we sold to insurance companies, we'd ask them, I said, how certain are you that you're not the victims of adverse selection at the hands of other insurers that have proprietary data? And you'd have to think about that because it is a fundamental strategic, if you know about the insurance business, it is an information business. And if you have proprietary information on people that others don't have, it is a strategic advantage. Mm-hmm. So that's an example of a provoking question. Then you get to the problem. And problem is really involved. It's, let me just kind of go through the 7. So there's problem questions, there's people questions, payoff, priorities, process, and prompting. With problem questions, you're trying to understand the current situation. So that's the current state. The next thing you're trying to understand is what's working, where are their challenges, and then you want to get to root causes. I've done a couple of posts on this lately where a lot of reps will hear something and they'll treat the symptom versus keep on diving deep to the root cause. Because if you just treat the symptom, it's like giving aspirin to somebody who has a headache is treating the symptom. The fact is they have a headache because they have a brain tumor, so they should probably go in for some treatment. So the root cause is the tumor. It's not the headache. The headache is the symptom. And so that takes a lot of practice to hear something from a customer who self-diagnoses and says they have a problem to go deeper to the root cause. You have to explore, well, what else have they tried? You're not the first person they're seeing. You're not the only thing they've considered if they're dealing with a problem. They probably have tried other things. So you want to know about those things and what's worked and not worked. You want to know what is the negative impact. So if you let this problem go on, how much is it going to cost you if you do not solve it? That's a negative impact. And then consequences really like, well, who else? How does it affect the larger part of the business? So you can have a productivity problem at a departmental level that grows into a real financial problem that grows into actually a strategic problem. So for example, in the telematics space, the fact that you're not doing efficient underwriting is a operational problem. The fact that your combined ratio is higher is a financial problem. The fact that you're losing market share to other insurers who are keeping those customers for years and years and years is a strategic problem. So you have to be good at linking. So that whole area of problem discovery is so rich. And if I were to pick one area to be great at out of all of those Magnificent Seven, it's like that is where the magic happens, I believe.
So let me ask you this, because one of the things that you mentioned, I mentioned this to you offline, is that there seemed to have been a motif, I guess, if you will, of selling to individuals. You're selling to individuals, you're selling to people, you're not selling to businesses as you're going through there, right? And so the problems that you just stated are certainly business problems, right? Enterprise problems. But there's also, depending on who you're talking to, whoever the stakeholder is, whether it's the champion, economic buyer, or anybody in between, there's also individual problem, right? In other words, do you go there as well in terms of, okay, here's the business problem, and then what does it mean to you, individual, David Morse, if this business problem doesn't get solved? Oh, you lose your job, you lose, those kinds of things. Like, are you weaving those questions into the discovery as well, both personal and business?
Jay, it's a good call out because, again, I think we've talked about it is you're not selling to corporations, you're selling to people. Yeah. My perspective is it all matters. It all matters, right? So the pain has to be big. It has to go up to the strategic level in the best case. There is a left brain element to this and there's a right brain element to this, right? The left brain element is the business case made by numbers, right? Because the way businesses buy is, yes, they have a strategic need and they may have some emotional needs that they're trying to solve, but they justify these things rationally and logically with numbers because they have resources to allocate, right? Budgets, people. So there's a logical element to this. That said, at a deeper level, why are people focused on these things is, like Jay, if you're, let's say, the GM of a division, you have a profit and loss number, your livelihood, whether your kids go to a good school or not, whether you go on vacation or not, whether you succeed in your career, your future stream of earnings, depending upon you doing a good job in this role and solving this problem. So that is a very personal, very emotional, person kind of dependent dynamic. And my experience is to get into that realm with people, you have to have delivered something and earn their trust for them to open up about that. When they don't know you as a seller and they don't trust you yet, you're probably going to stick to a lot of the left brain conversations. Over time, as you do a good job and you're in trust, just like you would with a friend. When you trust a friend, you open up a little bit more and they'll tell you like, hey man, I'm really scared about this. This is what it really needs to me to do this. And I don't always get that. And you don't always get that in every deal. That not everybody puts their cards on the table like that, but some have. And when you find that out, it's important. It's important not to like kind of rub people's face in it or be like too over the top. It's just, something it actually is something that brings me closer to a buyer, like a vulnerability, and makes me really want to help them, especially if they're a good person and they've treated me in a good way. And as a partner, like I feel a sense of just, we're in this together. That's really a great part of being in sales. That's one of the things I really loved, is to be able, when I've had close relationships, when I've worked with people, when I've helped them get promoted, when, or had a part in getting them promoted. It's not, you have to be realistic and like, you're one piece of this thing and you have to be humble about it. But like, it's a real joy. It is a real joy when you see people succeed and their careers go places because maybe something you had a part in doing together. And that goes beyond the money of sales and the accomplishment of sales to just being like, I don't know, part of the human race.
What's interesting is as you were just saying that about the left brain, right brain thing, when it comes to sort of the way that the buyer thinks, what happens in your brain too as a seller is now all of a sudden you go from left brain to right brain because you really are invested in that person's individual stake in the company and success and all that. And you really want to lean in. Like I know just as a recruiter, especially a lot of times the companies that I recruit for are certainly like earlier stage kind of companies, right? You're working with, founders, CEOs, and you know that the hires that they're making at that critical moment, maybe they raised a series C or A or whatever, like really, really matter. So I would imagine that as you were just describing there, right, if you're working with someone, a stakeholder who, again, starts off at the business level, but then starts to come back into the right brain, like, what does this mean for my career? I think as a seller, great sellers, I believe, and leaders are empathetic, right? And so now all of a sudden it's not just about you and the deal that you're trying to close by the end of the quarter and your own commission check. It really is about trying to do fundamentally what sales is, which is helping others.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you do those things, as the outcome falls into place, if you do the right process things, you have to stay focused on the outcome and spend your time in the right places, of course.
Yep.
But, in general, like I definitely have found more that the more I've tried to serve, the more I've tried to help, the better my sales have been.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. What's the saying? I'm thinking of a quote by Zig Ziglar. I say this all the time to my kids, so I should know this, but let me see if I don't screw it up. You can have anything you want in life as long as you help enough people get what they want, right? And at the end of the day, that's what it is, right? You're helping people get what they want. And as long as you have that as your core sort of whatever North Star, I guess, if you will, then ultimately you'll get what you want in the end too as well. Which is
and people feel that. And generally people are good and they reciprocate.
Yeah, for sure.
Trust like that.
Maybe I'm getting this phrase wrong, but you can correct me. Is it the pain loop or problem loop? Where you're, which is it?
Problem loop.
Tell me about the problem loop here in terms of what in its significance in this these problem questions, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, the way I would think about it is once you maybe identify a symptom, that's the trigger to get into this loop where you're exploring things at a deeper and a wider level.
Mm-hmm.
right? So deeper means that I go to the root cause. Like, for example, the headache tumor example I used before is you're trying to understand like what is the root cause of why it's causing. So for example, in the book, I use a lot of like marketing technology examples.
Mm-hmm.
And in our fictional scenario, there's all sorts of problems, right? One is
Mm-hmm.
just the cost of many people managing these kind of crazy systems. But the real root cause of their revenue problems is that they can't get campaigns out fast enough. And so they
Mm-hmm.
don't engage customers and they don't engage them in the right way. And as a result, they lose revenue. So the root cause there is, the inability to get those things out on time. And it's not necessarily content tagging. It is the workflows need to be streamlined because they're too kind of crazy. So that's really the root cause behind everything. So you have to dive deep into that. Then the other thing is, okay, so once you understand the root cause, that might be the root cause, the next thing you have to say is, all right, these are smart people. It's not like they're hearing this for the first time. They probably have a good idea. What have they done to try to solve this thing? Sometimes they have manual workarounds. Sometimes they've talked to other vendors. Sometimes they may have something existing that's not quite working right. Most businesses have tried things, right? So you want to find out, and you want to find out because you want to learn is like, well, uh, this could or couldn't work here for some reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be it cultural, somebody stands in the way, something, right? So you want to try to understand what you want to do, the things that work, and you want to avoid the things that don't work, right? When you're kind of trying to understand the alternatives and position your solution so that you do those things. So that's
And as you're, sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
no. So that's number two. That's the alternatives. So then the negative impact is just the cost of that problem. So, for example, I think we use in the do the math section, you come out with the fact that 40% of their campaigns are late. They do so many campaigns a year. Every campaign carries with it X amount of revenue, and you miss Y amount of revenue. And then if you add up all those campaigns over the month, over the course of the year, it's like $100 million when you total up the missed revenue, right? So that is the negative impact. Now, the consequence is when you don't solve it, that $100 million problem just kind of grows by 10% each month. And at the end of the next year, you have an even bigger hole because you have a $200 million problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that's taking it one step further. One is to quantify it at a point in time, but then the consequences about projecting it forward to say, will this problem get worse and how much worse will it get if you don't do something about it? So that's the problem loop, is going from the very lowest root cause and making these links to like this big financial and strategic number at the end.
Yes.
That says we really should take action if we like to hit our metrics and achieve our revenue targets.
Yeah. So it's like what's causing the headache, and then what do you want to do so to prevent it from recurring again, so to speak, or even or to your point that you just mentioned, getting worse.
And you've seen this, right? You've probably seen this in sales organizations where you don't fix something and the hole gets bigger. Like the shortage to a pipeline to your goal, like the gulf gets wider. And then when you see that happening as a leader, you're like, oh man, like, how are we going to get this back on track? Because it's not going in the right direction. We're not making progress against that gap.
Right. Absolutely. And sometimes people will procrastinate and it only gets worse, right? Because the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you're like, oh shit, we're in this big hole. And then you end up making a mistake in one way or another, right?
Yeah.
Putting a
And they can
Band-Aid
procrastinate. They might procrastinate because they don't think the problem is big enough,
on.
which may be true,
Hmm.
right? But it may be big enough. It's just that they don't realize it. So one of your jobs is to also grow the problem bigger in an ethical way, and then link it to the things that executives care about, financials and strategic value.
Hmm.
Yes. And do executives really care that, DMo saves, 10 hours a week? Not really. Do they care about performing well on their analyst calls and the stock price? You bet they do.
Hmm.
Right. So that's why it's like if they're procrastinating, maybe because they don't perceive it to be big enough and you haven't done a job as a seller to kind of make those linkages.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Being cognizant of time. I'm telling myself to be cognizant of time because I feel like there's so many more questions I have to ask. We got about 15 minutes, and I feel like I
Yeah,
still
I
got.
feel like I could keep going like
I
a
know
24-hour talkathon.
I got a lot in. I got a lot still in my head that I want to. Yeah. So let me just ask you this then, because again, something you just mentioned, which is doing the math, is can you bring in the math too soon? In other words, as you say in the book, there's a right time for every question, so to speak, right? When I guess are you bringing math into the equation, so to speak, and is it only with the economic buyer or the executives, or is it maybe a step that step below that, so to speak, with champions and whatnot?
I think if you can credibly discuss it, if you have some trust early, I think early is okay.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge might be that you may not have trust yet with the person where some of that information might be sensitive and they might be reluctant to reveal it yet.
Mm-hmm.
If this isn't a first conversation. So there, what you can do is you can talk about the math by talking about customer case studies and say, well, look, this is kind of how the math works, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
If you like what you heard today, can we maybe get some of your team together and put together a business case for you that would involve your numbers?
Mm-hmm.
And, if you have enough trust, maybe it's the next meeting that you can, or the next couple of meetings after that, where they trust you a little bit more and they would open up and they believe that you could put together a good business case. And then so timing, when do you talk about it? I think you talk about it early. Again, it depends upon trust as to when you get their personal information to build their personal business case. So if you don't have that, use other case studies and examples to help them understand the math and just talk to them about it. Say, Jay, we don't have your official numbers, but like based on what I know about your business and other businesses, this seems like kind of in the ballpark of what the math might look like. What's your perspective?
Yeah, for sure.
And then let's go do something specific. The second part of the question you asked was around who do you do it with?
Mm.
My experiences in the old days when there weren't so many solutions and so many sellers, you had to go to the economic buyer and you can get that audience and it was command and control and they just tell their teams to go do it. I think those days are long gone. I think C-level executives and GMs have VPs and directors who they charge with solving problems. So it is really important for those who sell to big companies and enterprises to be able to work with the director and VP level to build that business case, because a C-level executive does not have time to teach you. They do not have time to spend in a room with you. They have like 15 minutes with you during a deal. And you talk about different things. But what you do is you do spend time with those directors and VPs and their teams, and you build that business case and you get your stuff in order so that when your moment comes on stage with that economic buyer, the team is behind it. The numbers have been vetted. It's probably already been socialized. And, in the best cases, like the meeting is a foregone conclusion. They just, the executive just wanted to meet you,
Right.
talk through it, see what you said. And, if their team is behind it, a lot of times the executive will support it as long as it supports one of their priorities. If the team is not behind it and hasn't done their homework and hasn't put forth a business case, you may not even have the meeting because they're going to be like, this is just a waste of time. I don't have what I need to make a good decision.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yep. That makes sense. I wonder, as you're sitting in the C-suite yourself and you're the recipient of these messages, so to speak, right? In other words, you have been the economic buyer, what your experience has been, but I'm just going to leave that dangling for maybe part two of this.
I leverage my VPs and directors to solve problems.
Yeah. Okay.
I was not the first one on, vendor calls. I was not. I trust my team, and I had a really great head of RevOps, and he did a lot in those areas to evaluate the technology and work with the team to figure it out before it got to me.
Yep, there you go. I just want to recap the Magnificent Seven. I want to encourage people to certainly don't. This would be one of the first places I'd go, frankly, because I think this is fantastic. Chapter 23 in the book starts at page 205. It's provoking questions, problem questions, which is what we've spent a lot of time on here. And there's so many different subsets to each question type, if you will. People questions, as David mentioned, payoff questions, priority questions. And then there's process questions. And I believe the last was it provoking? Prompting questions.
Prompting.
For sure. So a lot of meat on a lot of those questions for sure. We don't have the time to go into them necessarily on this podcast, but for sure, it's something that I would advise, especially if you're a sales leader, to share with you, to go through it and share, make sure your team is aware of it as well. But the book is just phenomenal. But with the time that we have left, let's go into the rapid fire 5. If you're up for a little quick round there, David.
Let's do it.
Fabulous. Okay. I feel like this is going to be a good question. I'm so curious about this question. Which is number one. What motivates you? Tell me about what motivates you.
Quite a few things, but in business, in the software business, I just love the game. I love the go-to-market game and figuring it out and growing companies. I mean, it's just an intrinsic thing I love. On a personal level, I love helping others succeed. I love creating. Being a creative person, and I love humor. All those things motivate me in my daily life.
Name a big goal you have right now, and when would you like to accomplish it?
I want to create $1 million business in 12 to 18 months.
Love that. So exciting. You got to come back here and tell us about it in 18 months, what it is, or 12 months even.
Yeah. Or keep delaying if I haven't quite made it. No.
Yeah, we'll keep extending it. That's right. Well, come on anyways, and we can talk about it.
Hopefully, I'll come back to you in 6 months today.
Yeah, exactly. I want to contemporaneously document this journey. What's your most preferred way to learn new information to stay sharp?
So many. Sometimes I read books when I'm looking for an author's perspective to go deep in a topic. I listen to podcasts. Yours, Revenue Builders podcast, is another great one I really, really love. Yeah. To learn things like technical, procedural, I use YouTube videos. Mm-hmm. I use AI to construct my own learning agendas for a topic I want to master. Mm-hmm. And then doing, like for like a lot of the video stuff I do with my rap, I'm like getting deep into these video tools and figuring them out, Just there's no substitute for producing a crappy video, learning something, and then hopefully making it better the next time. So
I love those videos, by the way, for sure. Please keep them coming. I even have questions about that. Who's your favorite character of all time?
I have to say Iron Man. I have, it's my laptop cover. It's a little statue in my office, but successful, smart, leader, team player, funny, just like all the things I would want to be is like encapsulated in Iron Man.
You love a rap. I thought you were going to say something like Old Dirty Bastard, but okay.
Oh, I have all those heroes too. Don't
there you go. Old TV. What's your favorite thing to do when you aren't working?
Spend time with friends and family, outdoors. I like skiing and hiking and traveling. And then I do spend a lot of time on rap and comedy and like getting better at it and learning video and distribution on social platforms. Like it's a rich area to explore. So making music and making my friends and family laugh and other people laugh, which is and entertaining them is really fun.
I had my son listen to the Imaginary Players
what do you think? Because you educated him on that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I had been listening. There's two versions of that, by the way, right? So they have Jay-Z's version, and now there's 3. They have Jay-Z's version. That's the original. Then you have Cardi B, and Cardi B was actually the one who reminded me of the original version, which I love Cardi B's version. And then obviously your version, DMo.
So, yeah. All right, we got to put them all 3 up there and see who wins head to head. Probably Jay-Z.
I'm gonna put a poll out there on LinkedIn.
All right,
let's do it. Which one's better? Okay, so here's the bonus question from my last guest, which is, if you made, it's an arbitrary number, but this is what he chose. If you made $1 billion, I'm assuming like individually, not for the company, would you retire, spread the wealth around, or would you get back in the game?
Ooh, that is a good question. Because I do love the game of go-to-market, and I'm like loving learning about AI. It's just I'm curious about it. Yeah. So there's part of me like, no matter how much money I had, I would think I would like to do that. But if I didn't want to do that, I'd definitely spend more time making music and doing comedy and just being creative, writing books. Just like I would never see myself as like a leisure type of person. I'm like engaged and in life and doing, harder things no matter how much money you have.
Yeah, love it. Growth mind, right? Which is why you're on the Goats of Growth. Next question, or this is the question that I'd like for you to ask my next guest, if you will, which is, so what would it be? What would you like for me to ask my next guest?
Well, Jay, I think, you get places in this world through the grace and help of a lot of people. It's not just yourself. So I like, to ask, like, what is just the nicest, kindest, you didn't spell on your computer, did you? But yeah, what is the?
You saw that close, but I think we'll live.
Let me know if you need to take care of that. But
It's fine.
what is the nicest, kindest thing somebody's done for you to help you out in your life? Because I think reminding ourselves of all the good things that people, we have these egos and we think we may be at the center of the universe, but there's been people who helped us out in life, and just recognizing that, appreciating that is always a good thing to revisit.
For sure.
So what's the nicest or kindest thing that somebody's done for you?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. That is so important. I can even think of your old boss, the CEO of your company, was certainly one of those people in my life, which is
he's an awesome dude.
Yeah, Bill Powers,
awesome dude.
Mobile Telematics. I love that guy.
Bill Powers, yep, awesome guy.
Yep, he is fantastic. Lastly, tell me where people can go and get the book, and how they can reach you to maybe follow up, say thank you, maybe looking for an advisor for their own company. What's the best way to get the book and to find you?
Yep, thank you, Jay. So Amazon, just Heart of the Sale by David Morse, and you'll find ebook, paperback, hardcover, whatever you want. And then if you'd like to reach out to me to talk about what's going on in your company and see whether some of my wisdom and services could help, just go to yodavidmorse.com. There's a contact us, and just I respond within 24 hours.
And we want them to respond even faster. Just mention the Goats of Growth.
I do.
Subject line, and
yeah. No. I pretty much respond faster, but I definitely never let it go past 24 hours.
There you go. Fantastic. DMo Morse. Thank you so much.
And Jay, can I leave you with one gift before we go?
Yeah, sure.
So I have a rap for you.
Okay. All
right.
Yeah.
All right. So here we go. So who's the guy talking about growing that rev? Yup, it's this guy, the man, Jay Webb. And who's the CRO who make the revenue grow? I think we all know it's your boy DMo. Mag 7, problem questions, lessons from Marines, a feeder skill to help you kill, discipline discovery. DMo's discipline and humor, you can do them both, but listen to Jay and you'll be a goat of growth.
I love it.
Boom.
Fire on one take too, by the way, Jay-Z style.
Boom.
I love it. That was fantastic. All right. Well, I'm definitely going to have my son Jalen listen to that too, and my daughter.
Yeah, man. I love what you're doing. Keep it up. Great podcast, and your vibe is great, and what you're bringing out is really great. Keep it up.
I appreciate that for sure. Everybody, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Tell a friend, colleague, and all that stuff, because it really helps me get this show out to more people and keeps me motivated to continue to publish these. So thank you very much, David Morse. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Jay.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.